It is that time of the show when we say hello to today's guest, and we are joined by Omar Akram, who is a Grammy award-winning recording artist, and I understand the first Afghani to ever win that award. And Omar, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Ron, for having me.
You know, I was so looking forward to having you on the show for a couple of reasons. One, I love the kind of instrumental music that you do, and two, you're a local boy. You're right here in LA.
That's right. That's right.
So, you know, for those that may not be as familiar with you, you do kind of a new age instrumental music, no lyrics, just all the music, although your music does, in my opinion, tell a story. But before we get into your music, your personal story, the adventure of your life that's led you to where you are today is really fascinating. Tell us a little bit about your beginnings and your beginnings in music.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Ron, for inviting me to the show. I was born in New York City. Like you mentioned, both of my parents are Afghani, but I was born in New York.
So first generation.
First generation. And my father used to work for United Nations in New York.
Oh, wow. Thus the traveling.
Yes. And so we went back, when I was 4 years old, we went back to Afghanistan for a little bit. And then we traveled to Prague, Czech Republic. And then we traveled to Cuba for a couple of years, and then we came back to the States. So my life has been about traveling and being exposed to different cultures.
You know, and this is kind of almost a side subject, but to me, I think it's so important. You probably, because of your travel in other countries, have a better appreciation for what we have in this country than a lot of kids who haven't had, because you've seen how, you know, other countries and even some third world countries are living as opposed to what we have.
Absolutely. We have it great in this country.
And I wish more people really got that. I really do.
Absolutely.
But that also, I'm guessing, has added to who you are, and who you are is what your music becomes. So with all of these travels, you know, you're a pianist. How did you get started in your musical career? And did you know early on that's what you would be doing?
Well, I was a hyper child when I was 3 or 4 years old.
Aren't they all at that age?
Absolutely. And my mother would play music for me to calm me down. So every time she played music, I would calm down. So when I was about 5 or 6 years old, they thought, okay, why don't we get him a piano? Maybe he'll really calm down if we give him piano lessons, right? So that's when I started to take piano lessons. We were living in the Czech Republic in Prague at that time. And that's when I started to take piano lessons. And I really kept it going. I mean, it's hard for a kid.
Oh, a 5-year-old especially. But you know what that says? Just something. This is so funny. Because in this country, if you were hyper, they wouldn't have suggested a piano. They would have just put you on drugs. You know, it just makes it.
I know.
That makes, okay, so the kid's hyper, let's give them something to express that through.
Absolutely.
And look where it's led. So you started at 5, and like most kids, I'm sure if at some point it was something that you absolutely hated, you would have moved away from. So I'm guessing that was never the case.
Well, you know, I hated taking piano lessons.
Oh, okay. At least you're honest.
But when my teacher left is when I would sit there and kind of play a little bit, and you know, and that part I enjoyed when I was sitting by myself. So later on, when I was a teenager, I started, you know, writing music.
So you were writing it as early as your teens.
I would say about 14, 15, I started playing my own music, yes.
Now, through all these travels, because, you know, you left us off in Prague when I took us off in a whole nother direction.
Right.
You also spent some time in Cuba, and I understand had some very interesting experiences there.
Well, I gotta tell you a story. My mother was actually on vacation, and my dad, you know, was invited to a diplomatic reception given by Fidel Castro.
Okay, as part of his UN job.
Part of, yes. He was the ambassador from Afghanistan to Cuba.
Okay.
So he's like, son, do you want to go to this reception? I said, fine. He said, just.
Now, how old were you at the time?
I was 14.
Okay, all right.
And so we go to this reception, and it was wonderful. I mean, huge palace. All these people are in line to get in. And as we walked in, Fidel goes, okay, well, this is Mr. Akram, and oh, this is his son. You know, the translator was there. And so we start talking. He says, well, how do you like living in Havana? You know, and all these people are standing behind us. But
so they're all in line, and you're standing there chit-chatting with...
Being the youngest kid, I don't know if he wanted to show off or what, but we're just talking, and I told him about music and how much I love, you know, jazz music, and especially African jazz in Cuba. And he says, you should go and check out some clubs, you know, in Havana. I go,
but you're 14.
I'm 14. I said, well, I can't get in, you know, to most of these places. So he's like, well, just use my name. True story. And I was just a little shocked, the fact that he told me that. And I said, all right, great. So we go on, and a couple weeks later, I go to this club, and I actually use his name. I said, you know, they're like, you're too young. You can't get into this club. And I said, well, Fidel Castro sent me here. They're like, please, come in. You know, it's interesting because nobody would lie about that. I mean, this.
Oh,
you
that
see
was
what I
my
mean?
question.
Exactly.
Okay.
It's not like you can just go into a place, and they knew my dad is an ambassador.
Oh,
so,
okay.
You
So
know what
it
I mean?
seemed legitimate. Right.
Yeah, you can't just go, because you know, I mean, it's a communist country.
Right.
So you're gonna jeopardize your life
Yeah,
if you're gonna
to get
say
into
that.
a club.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's hilarious.
So when I got in, what I would do is, when the musicians would play, you know, they would take a break. Then I would go on stage and just play the piano, you know, in between their set. And
oh, that must have been exciting. You know, big audience, appreciative.
yeah, it was fun. And then sometimes the musicians would come back, and they're like, "Who's this kid?" You know, and I'm like, "Okay, I'm out of here." They're like, "No, stay, just, you know, keep jamming." So that was a great learning experience to be able to do that, to be able to be a part of that.
So when did you make your first album?
My first album came out in 2002, called Opal Fire, released by Real Music. And really, that was the beginning of what became, you mentioned the Grammy Awards. It's my fourth album that won the Grammy Award. But my first one was released in 2002. So
there's a gap between Cuba and your first album. What filled that gap? Just coming up with the content? Did you know all along you wanted to do your own album, or?
It's called struggling. That's what that gap was.
Okay.
Right? So the gap was...
That also makes us who we are, though.
Yes, exactly. You know, as I'm sure you're aware that it's, you know, sometimes it takes a while to make it to win a Grammy. So I'm really, really happy to be where I'm at today.
Awesome. Well, we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to hear a little bit from your Grammy award-winning album and the title song, Echoes of Love. And then we'll continue the conversation. So you don't want to miss the music, so don't go away. The best part of this conversation is yet to come. We'll be right back. So I'm guessing for any performer to win such a prestigious award, at least the first time, has to be a tad overwhelming.
Yes.
I mean, because you work so hard, not knowing if you're ever going to really be recognized. That's usually the case for new artists.
Right.
And then when you finally are, what's that like?
And winning a Grammy while you're still alive, as opposed to winning one of those lifetime achievement awards, you know, 50 years after
you mean where you were
dead.
ignored for 50 years and they go, oh man, he was good.
Yeah, and then by
perfect.
then it doesn't really make any difference, right? Well, yeah, I mean, I'm just overwhelmed just thinking about it, you know, and then I was at an event last night and people are saying Grammy award-winning recording artist. It's just an amazing feeling. But you're absolutely right, it takes so long, but you have to pay your dues. You have to work hard. You know, nothing's gonna come to you easy. I mean, you know that. Mm-hmm. And you know, this being my fourth album, but I've worked for, I don't know, 20 years to get to where I'm at. But at the same time, you don't win a Grammy Award even if you work 20 or 30 years.
If you're not good enough for it.
Yeah, I think the whole landscape is shifting a little bit as far as music and people's perception of music. And I think, I don't know if you're aware, but this year, the movie Life of Pi for the soundtrack won. And that's more of a Indian world music type of music for the soundtrack that won an Oscar.
Well, and I wanted to ask you about that because of all of the musical genre you could have gone into, instrumental / new age is probably not one of the leading, what most people would think of, especially for a young kid who grew up in New York. So what moved you in that direction musically?
My training is in European classical music, but then later on, I was really attracted to, I want to say, electronic music from France. There was this guy, Jean-Michel Jarre, who does electronic music, new age, instrumental, Kitaro from Japan, Vangelis from Greece. I don't know, I was really attracted to that, and especially that there's no language barrier, and people make up their own images. I mean, Ron, I get emails from all around the world, almost on a daily basis, and people are telling me, oh, I was listening to your music and I envisioned this. And that's really evident on YouTube, for instance. I have over 10 million hits on YouTube. And people are taking their own images and putting it with my music. And I think that's fantastic.
Well, and what I love about that, and it makes so much sense, is our world is shrinking. And anyone that denies it is just nuts. And we are starting to think of ourselves as more of a global community. Right. And what you do cuts through cultural barriers, it cuts through language barriers. And while there's no language, lyrics, or words, when I listen to your music, I too see images. So my question is, when you're writing it, do you write it to images in your mind, or do you write the music that comes to your mind and people apply their own images?
Well, obviously I have my own images, but that's not really that important. What's important is when the listener listens to my music and they create their own images. Obviously I have my own mood or whatever, that I'm thinking or envisioning myself when I write the piece. But like I said, it's really interesting how people are making up their own visuals and images with my music.
Do you see much commonality among those? And what I mean by if there was a segment in your music that clearly made the sound of a train, most people are going to image a train. Now you don't. But right. My question is, I'd be curious to know, do you start seeing is your music, is the subtle messaging so clear that people see similar things when they're listening to it? Or is it all different?
That's a good question. I mean, the theme might be the same. If it's a romantic piece,
okay.
Romantic, I guess, means something different to everyone.
But the overarching theme is romance.
So, yeah, sometimes if it's romance, then you could see sometimes people put their family images. Sometimes people put places that they've been to, or someone that they love, or whatever. So but the overall theme could be the same, but it's from different countries, from Romania.
So that's going to really change culturally.
Yeah, exactly. So it's really interesting to see that, how people create their own images with my music.
And you've got another album that's done or in the works?
Actually, it's done. I'm happy to say that it's done.
That strikes me as a lot of work.
It's a lot of work, but this one is called Daytime Dreamer, and it's going to be out on September 24th.
Okay.
And I'm really, really excited about this album.
Okay, Daytime Dreamer. Now, if someone wants more information about you or to even purchase some of your CDs, albums, how can they do that?
Well, they can go to my website, omarmusic.com, or they can go on Amazon, look my name, Omar Akram, or on iTunes, and I'm available everywhere.
You're everywhere. Well, I personally love your music. It's the kind of music that soothes me, just like that piano music of your mom soothed you as a young child, because I won't take drugs either. So thank you for your music. Thank you for sharing it with the world.
Thank you very much, Ron. Thank you.
Don't go away. We will be right back.